And now I'm pleased to welcome DePaul student Olivia Tegg, who is a junior in the Environmental Studies Department. She's also got minors in public policy and Spanish, so she's probably very busy. I'm glad she decided to take time out to help moderate our session this afternoon on Stories of Hope on One Page. We'll hear from a few of the presenters who are contributing right now to a more sustainable world. If you haven't yet done it, I will put in the chat the links to go to our Padlet.com pages where you can view all the posters that have been submitted so far. And if you have not yet submitted a poster, you should be able to do so if you would like, or if you have a link to a URL that's a website that you'd like us to see, you can also add that. But right now, I think I'm hoping that some of our presenters are ready to go, so I'm turning it over to you, Olivia. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Pat. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the story session of the Vincentian Family Contributions to a Sustainable World. My name is Olivia Tegg, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this interactive Zoom session. We have several presenters who will summarize their posters, and please feel free to ask any questions, as Pat said, in the chat. I would like to invite our first presenter, Dr. Stephanie Witchhart, to begin her presentation. Stephanie, go ahead and unmute yourself and start whenever you are ready.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit with you about what we did for Vincentian Heritage Week this year at Niagara University. I'm a professor of history there, and I'm also the faculty mission director. And Niagara University is located in Western New York. We're right on the Niagara River and on the US-Canada border. And so Vincentian Heritage Week is something that we observe every year, and it's a great opportunity to encourage faculty and staff and students and the wider community to really see the connections between the academic work that we do as a university and our Catholic and Vincentian mission. And so our theme this year was sustainability more broadly, but with just everything that has happened over the last few months, we decided it was really, really important to highlight the link between environmental justice and racial justice, and why it matters now, and why it's so important for us as a Catholic and Vincentian university to harness our resources to try to address these issues. And so, you know, like everywhere, we had some limitations this year with COVID, but we used this as an opportunity to develop a mix of in-person and virtual events. And pretty much everything we did was recorded or streamed. And so on the poster that I developed here, I put a bunch of links, all the blue text, to the mission YouTube page, to the videos that were created. Up at the top of the screen, you can see the link to our whole schedule. There was a video prayer, the convocation was recorded. And so, you know, if you're interested, I welcome you to look at some of those resources. So on the left, I have some thoughts from Father Aidan Rooney, CM, Vice President for Mission Integration, and how he visualized the week and the goals that we were trying to achieve. And then I divided everything else really into 3 sections. So, you know, we had lots of opportunities for reflection during the week with opening and closing masses and an outdoor prayer and signage around the campus to just make sure that the week was present in people's minds. And then we also had a number of resources that were related to academics. So, you know, again, trying to get students to see how what they're doing in the classroom is equipping them to help to tackle these issues in a way that's keeping with our heritage. And so our librarian, one of our librarians, put together this wonderful research guide with links to good articles and sources. And we had a number of faculty share how they work on issues related to this theme in their particular disciplines. And these materials that we developed for Vincentian Heritage Week are also incorporated into our first year experience. So our freshman students are encouraged to engage with the university mission through these materials. We had a great faculty presentation on outdoor education. And then in our convocation, we highlighted and honored a number of people at the NU community, but also in the wider community who are addressing these issues. So that's kind of an overview of what we did, and our logos in the middle of the screen. You know, overall, I think the week went well, and you know, I think we saw the value of having all of our materials and programming virtual as well, in order to widen the audience of those who could participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I would like to reiterate, if anybody has any questions for our presenters, please leave them in the chat. I would now like to invite Caroline Brinkworth, Camilla Cortez, and Maddie Fernandez to present.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So today we're going to share our story of hope in saving an endangered endemic oak called Quercus brandysii, or more commonly the arroyo oak, by determining methods for conservation through statistical analyses. So this summer we worked with the Morton Arboretum and their partners in Mexico to conduct statistical research on the arroyo oak, because what their research was showing was that arroyo oaks have not been regenerating successfully for about 100 years. And why this is important is because, as is the case with any species, these trees provide important ecological and socioeconomic benefits to animals in the area, both wild and livestock, as well as the ranchers in the area. And this tree species is also very special because it's endemic to Baja California Sur, Mexico, and it only occurs on the ephemeral riverbeds of the Sierra de la Laguna mountain range that are seasonally inundated by hurricane waters. So it's a very rare, unique species, and it's very particular in the way it acquires resources. So in figure 1 here on the upper left corner of the screen, this is part of my research. I conducted a population structure analysis, and what this gave me was spatial distribution graphs, which is what you see here. This is one population, La Burera, in the region. As you can see, so there, it might be a little hard to visualize if you don't really know what it looks like on a map, but this population is split in the middle, as you can see, by, if you were looking at Google Maps, a riverbed. So, and it's kind of clustered around, which might indicate that it's an aggregated population. And what this means is this will tell us, once I do make the final step in our research to find the value of aggregation, it'll tell us what the natural distribution in the environment of this species is. So if my hypothesis is correct, when we conclude the research and study that this is an aggregated population, that'll tell us that it is specifically aggregated around this scarce water resource, which will have best management implications and the way that these trees are replanted during the experiments in the field. And now I'm gonna pass the mic to my collaborator, Camila, who's gonna tell you guys a little bit about the reproductivity of this species.
All right, thanks, Carolyn. So yeah, like Carolyn mentioned, this tree has not been reproducing in about the last 100 years. And what's the first step in like reproduction? Well, that would be the trees actually producing acorns. So my segment of the project focused on looking at reproduction patterns that we could possibly see either through using DBH classes, which is diameter at breast height of each tree, and by looking at separate regions for the tree. So hopefully you can see here in figure 2, I have about 8 DBH classes, and the way we measure DBH is by taking a measuring tape, put it around the tree, measure the circumference at about 4.5 feet above the ground, and then divide by pi to get that diameter. And so now that we have these 8 classes, as you can see, not each region doesn't have all 8 classes filled, showing that they're mainly large trees, as we would expect, since this population is mostly mature individuals. So you're only going to see these massive trees like we have here in this picture. And it was really interesting to see that these dark graphs here, or dark bar graph portions, are the number of reproducing individuals. So reproduction doesn't necessarily change based on DBH size class, but it is changing pretty clearly by region. So we have 4 regions: Golfo, Norte, Pacífico, and Sur. And here, clearly, Golfo has the greatest amount of lighter green bars, so the greatest amount of not reproducing individuals. And now we're left with the question, well, we have these differences in region, not necessarily by individual trees. So what might cause this? And that brings in another portion of what I'm working on, which are generalized linear models, so that we can try and see which factors like climate, soil, nutrients may affect these different regions and how they sort of trigger the onset of actually producing acorns. And so now that we have these differences, we're then left wondering, well, once acorns drop, what exactly happens when that seed germinates and then the seedling is established? And I can pass that portion off to my collaborator, Maddie, who gets a little bit more into that.
Thank you, Camila. Hi, everyone. So going off of what Camila, wait, can everyone hear me? First of all, okay, good. Going off of what Camila and Carolyn have said, it is really important to understand not only the spatial distribution of the trees and the amount of reproducing individuals, but also, like Camila said, what happens once a tree does release acorns. So Dr. Sylvia Alvarez Clare of the Modern Arboretum and collaborators in Mexico set up experiments to do just that. So we had seedlings within 4 different enclosures, and these enclosures were based on light and protection from herbivory by local cattle. So seedlings were either left in the open or the sun or shade underneath a mother tree. And within those seedlings, half of them were placed within protected enclosures so that the cattle wouldn't be able to come in and eat them. And this was very significant. I did a survivorship analysis at the end of 7 months. And as you can see at the bottom figure, figure 3, it had a very significant impact. The seedlings that were planted inside protected enclosures had a much higher survivorship rate compared to the seedlings with adjacent to those unprotected. You can see that survivorship is really drastic. And this is really important because it supports the idea that cattle ranching and land use change is having an impact on the tree's ability to recruit and regenerate. However, because we also included light data, we still need to do a little more research and understand exactly how the climate impacts the tree. So we will be doing a little bit more of that, and we would also like to do a little more of seed dispersal research, as well as just having a long-term study, as the seedlings are just now reaching a year. So it is important to look at how climate data varies throughout the year and how that impacts the seedlings. And once again, this is all really important because the tree, like Camila said, hasn't been able to regenerate successfully into adult trees for 100 years. So this means that the population size is decreasing, and this might have implications with climate change, and that impacts directly the farmers and people who live in the region. And thus it is really important that we understand how to best get it off the UNC and red list. So we hope to just do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn, Camilla, and Maddie. After our next presenter, we will take some time to answer any questions that are left in the chat. And I would now like to invite Taylor Mclaren to present.
Good afternoon, y'all. Thank you, Olivia. My name is Taylor Mclaren. Thank you for the introduction, Olivia. I'm a student with the SPS. I'm a class of 2022, and my work recently was associated in community reforestation projects in Togo, West Africa. I was a Peace Corps volunteer there for 3 years between 2015 and 2018. I'm now in Nepal to get a better grip on management practices so that I can hopefully continue to work on reforestation projects. But just to give you a brief overview of the work that I did there, I kind of opted for just having pictures. I figured that would explain a lot more than anything that I could put in words. So if you look at this top left picture, there is a map of Togo and its rainfall patterns, and you can kind of see that there's this kind of running blue line that runs from southwest to northeast that follows along the chain of mountains there called the Atacora Mountains. And for anyone who's not necessarily familiar with Togo, you can kind of see in a smaller map there to the right, it's sandwiched between Ghana and Benin, and then Burkina Faso is to the north there. And you can see it's a very long and narrow country. And these mountains running north to south affect the rainfall patterns specifically. And but the other part of that is having trees on those mountains. So if you look at the second picture, you can kind of tell that there's a mountain, but that's not trees on it. It's all just grass. A lot of the area has been put under pressure by human population growth there, where folks are converting the forested areas into savanna, just, you know, for the collection of firewood for fuel, for their food preparation, and then also using that space to plant their crops on. However, I don't know if it's necessarily clear from this picture, but if you look at the very top of that mountain, there's this little bump there, and that's all of the woods that are left on that mountain. So at this point, a lot of the soil's been impoverished due to the annual burning that occurs as well there. So when I came to the village of Wazalau, which means the giving forest, my work mostly focused with community-based organizations, and particularly a village development organization whose main project that they wanted to pursue was improving food security, but also protecting the environment as well, and protecting their soil. So trees seem to be the best way to be able to kind of cross both of those bridges by, if you are planting food species, then those trees can produce food and contribute to food security, but also provide fuel as well, while also doing a host of other important, or providing a host of other important roles within an ecological community, such as protecting the soil, et cetera, improving soil health. And so most folks in Togo, if you look kind of to the third picture, do all of their work by hand. You can see this hoe that this gentleman is carrying is called a daba. All of it was worked like by hand, by humans. And a lot of these areas are incredibly rocky, so trying to farm in these places is difficult and probably best done by hand. So with using the resources that we had, you can look at this fourth picture that kind of on the far right at the top. You'll see my friend Koku's kind of crouched there. He's cutting open a little plastic bag. People drink water out of plastic bags. And we use those to make our own little pots and to produce a nursery, which you can kind of see there on the bottom right. And we had a whole host of different species. This nursery had about 500 individuals, ranging from neem to cashew to nitrogen fixing trees. And the original plan was to plant them all along the roadside to not only raise people's awareness of reforestation, but also to prevent road washout. And yeah, excellent. Thank you, Camilla. And they didn't necessarily do super well, because despite the fact that we had actually cut fire barriers around them, so the annual fires wouldn't come through and immolate the trees, the fire barriers that we put in weren't large enough to be able to protect the seedlings. So again, this is kind of why I've titled it Lessons Learned Through Trial by Fire, because we went back to the drawing board and realized, okay, instead of doing a huge community organization and project, if we targeted individual change agents, people who were willing to plant trees, then we would have better outcomes. And so our intent was not only supporting agriculture and reforestation and ecological support, but we then decided that it was best to integrate women as well, who traditionally don't have as much access to land as men do, and has been shown by integrating women into agricultural practices, it increases household income by 100%. So essentially doubling it. And so by working with women's groups, community-based women's groups, specific female farmers who had access to land or access to men who were operating as partners and willing to relinquish land and transfer that over to women, we were able to plant 1,000 more trees in addition, and most of those were cashew trees, kind of as a means to, again, increase food security while helping to protect land. And last I checked, the trees are doing really well, but I need to give my friends a call and check in with them. So I think, just to really conclude, I would say that if we can be integrating women into these processes and kind of the more marginalized people, even within marginalized societies, we end up developing better outcomes for everybody because of the kind of hope that that produces for them. So thank you so much, and I hope you all enjoy your conference.
Thank you, Taylor. So now we will do a brief Q&A session. Amanda, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, so you can put your questions in the chat and then we'll just read them off. And actually, do you want to stop sharing your screen, Olivia or Pat, whoever is sharing it, and we can all gather as one. So if anybody has any questions, you can just pop them right into the chat and then we'll address them.
I saw that our team of Maddie and Carolyn and Camilla already responded to some of the questions that were in the chat. If you have a question or a comment, just let us know and we can invite you to unmute and you can go ahead and ask the question.
Here we have one from Sister Sharon. Was there any resistance from the man in Togo to the women, from the men in Togo to the women? If so, what were the solutions?
Yeah, so the patriarchy is deeply entrenched there and is totally cultural. So the resistance from the men really dealt with, for them, it was like a control relinquishment for them. Specifically, they saw themselves as the kind of farmer and breadwinner of the family. So their resistance in relinquishing some of that control, I think, was really rooted in just the way that their society operated and worked. I think it was, it worked for Togolese people and it had been working for so long that like we just do the land stuff. And then women take care of the kids and take care of the food production. So the resistance was, a lot of it was based in stereotypes. And so you would have to have these kind of conversations, really just, men would say, oh, well, women aren't as strong. They should not be working the land because that's, men are stronger and we can do much more land than women can, or we can turn the land much more than women can. And so a lot of those conversations just had to be dealt with like piecemeal by having just a discussion like, well, you've seen what women are capable of. You've seen their fields, and in a lot of ways, their harvest would be good, and they would be working in women's groups. And so a lot of it really was just stereotyping women. And so the other resistance element to it that I had seen was that the men were also, yeah, I think it was really just stereotypes. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. And as far as solutions were concerned, we worked with the communities-based organizations to collect people and hold training sessions, sort of men as partners, and to seek men who could fulfill these sort of like peer mentoring roles, if you will, by targeting people who were already showing changes in their behavior and wanting to support women, and working with them as partners, or also holding trainings where we did value chain assessments with people. And so we showed 2 men that because they held so much power, that women weren't able to necessarily get ahead, and because women weren't getting ahead, they themselves weren't getting ahead. So we had to kind of lay it out for folks, because I never wanted to tell anybody that they were wrong, but I just wanted to have conversations with them about it. It's not necessarily about folks coming in and saying that you're doing a bad job. It's about raising awareness and developing those conversations with people in order to get them to see that by allowing other people access to land, for example, they themselves were going to benefit. So it was kind of a dance.
And there was a comment from Teresa Taylor. It's great to see reforestation coupled with food security. Thank you for empowering women as landholders. And then there's a question, I think, for Camila on tracking rainfall patterns over the past 100 years. Has that been happening?
Yeah, I can clarify a little bit. So basically, I'll backtrack to your first question about sort of these situations happening over 100 years. Personally, I'm not aware of whether or not like the ranching was happening for the past 100 years, but really it's a mixture of climate change, it's human conflict, and it's also genetics. Because this tree has been isolated from other species that it could potentially hybridize with, it hasn't had a chance to sort of, hybridize and then reproduce more acorns. So it's a lot of different factors that sort of act against it. And since we haven't seen a new tree for so long, it's really difficult to sort of pinpoint which one of these factors is this sort of exact cause. So what we can do, what we were able to do is work with the factors we know of that are occurring today. So we know that there is a lot of ranching going on today, both in the protected region, sort of where they have this natural areas in Baja California, and there's also ranching outside of the area. So basically with that, we were sort of using different types of models. So my model, which is the GLM, Generalized Linear Model, sort of focuses more on rainfall that occurred in 2017 and 2016. This reproductive data was collected in 2017, and there's a lot of other research that's indicated that rainfall of the previous year and potentially the year before it has a lot of impact on whether or not a tree can reproduce. So that's why we wanted to focus on those specific years. I wish we had data on reproduction over 100 years. That would be incredible. And it would probably give us a lot more insight into what exactly is going wrong with this specific species. But so unfortunately, we don't have 100 years of rainfall, but we are seeing if we can add La Nina or El Nino effects to this model, because potentially that might do something as well. We also need to add many more years of actual reproductive data as well, just to see if reproduction of 2020, 2021 would mirror that of 2017. Feel free to let me know if that also wasn't clear, if you have more questions.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I think we will move on to our next presenter. So I would like to welcome Sharon Horace to present.
Okay, took me a little off guard there. I made a video, first of all, so I'm going to hope that sometime along the line, you all will check in with the video. So what I'm going to talk about will be related to that, but I'm not going to say the exact same things. But what I'm talking about is beginning permaculture. So I'm working on a degree in sustainable and resilient communities. And one of the things I was interested in was permaculture. It was something that I heard a lot about, but I really wasn't sure what it was. So I took a design class. And for me, when I took that, the permaculture design class, it brought together a lot of the things that we think about when we think about sustainability, because you're talking about climate, water, land, how the environment and people relate, and then how things relate economically, or what they would, in permaculture, you would say fair share. So making sure that we're not taking too much of resources, and how does all that balance and work together. So I've attempted to do some of the things that I've learned here in the Rio Grande Valley, where I now live. I moved back in March, so it was a great opportunity for me to start. I came into a yard of dead grass. Everything had been dry, and they were telling me it had been like a drought here. So one of the first things I did was what a lot of people do, and you can do this anywhere, is to do a small compost pile. So I started that, and because we really don't have winter here, looked around back in the alley for people throwing out yard waste, pulled in some leaves that folks were throwing away, and got my compost pile going. So that serves multiple purposes. It not only helps to reduce the yard waste I put out, but it also helps to reduce the food waste. And it also will provide fertilization for the soil. And soil building is a really important thing. So that was the first thing I worked on. Second thing was water harvesting. Here in the Rio Grande Valley, for some reason, no one seems to put gutters on the houses, so I guess that it doesn't rain enough. But so the first thing I had to do was learn how to install a guttering system. And so I did just put that up on our back shed to see if I could do it, and I did it. And so I did the backyard of the house. And I think one of the things that I quickly learned is that the calculations you make in terms of how much water you can collect off of a rooftop or any flat surface is really important when choosing what kind of container you're gonna collect water from. So quickly my barrels filled up super fast, and I was wishing I had giant 100, 200 gallon barrels that could collect from all the gutters on my rooftop. So if anybody's interested in doing rainwater harvesting, I would definitely recommend make the investment up front to collect if it rains enough in your area, which it probably does. But also looking at some of the passive strategies that you can use so that your soil becomes more saturated and acts like a sponge. So that's also something I'm working on through some of the plants that I'm planting in the yard. Those are not all native, but in the philosophy of permaculture, it's more about the usefulness of the plants to the whole ecosystem and to humans, and what they can give to those things. So when choosing plants, it's not doing it because necessarily I like it or I think it's really pretty, but it's looking at what is my climate like, what are the things that are important in my environment, what are the pollinators here, what are things that are going to attract them, and then trying to identify plants that are going to serve multiple benefits. So you're always looking for the plants that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, to say it in a short way. So it's not just serving one purpose, it's serving multiple purposes. So you'll see some of that if you watch the video quickly. But if anybody out there is interested in permaculture or is a permaculturist, please connect with me, because I am super new at this and there's a lot to learn and it's a lot to take in. So I'd love to talk with someone who has more experience than I do, which is just about everyone. So thank you all for listening and for your time, and I look forward to hearing the other presentations.
Thank you, Sharon. Any questions, please leave in the chat. I would now like to invite Jean Stefan Nass to present.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to start off by thanking Dr. Bombard and DePaul University for planning this wonderful conference. My name is Jean Stefan. I'm a graduate student at DePaul University, and I'm also a passionate environmental activist. Today, I'll be discussing a nonprofit I volunteer for, the Climate Reality Project, and their approach to climate change. In large part, their response to the climate crisis has been focused on human rights. Increasingly, nonprofits and other climate activist groups have been advocating for climate action as a human rights issue. This approach is twofold. The first venue in which we can analyze climate change as a human rights violation is in the courts. In 2015, a nonprofit called the Urgenda Foundation sued the Dutch government for not doing enough to address climate change. They argued that the Dutch government had a responsibility to its citizens to protect their right to life. The District Court of The Hague, followed by the Dutch Supreme Court, agreed that climate change posed a real and immediate threat to the right to life, a right that the Netherlands had a legal obligation to protect under the European Convention on Human Rights. As a result, the courts ordered the government to reduce carbon emissions by at least 25% from 1990 levels by the end of 2020. This became a landmark case for climate change and human rights. And since then, similar cases have been won by climate activists using human rights as a legal framework. In Nepal, the courts ordered the government to enact climate legislation to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. As a result, the government passed the Environment Protection Act of 2019, which is a comprehensive climate plan. Now, I know that this is meant to be a story of hope, and it is, but I would be remiss not to mention the two major limitations of addressing climate change in the courts. The first is the length of time spent in court, given the urgency of the climate crisis. The Dutch lawsuit started in 2015, but has gone through countless appeals that have lasted all the way until the end of 2019. Other cases are still awaiting decisions, which can sometimes take years. There are currently cases pending in multiple countries, including Canada, France, and Germany. The second limitation is enforcement. For example, in Colombia, the courts recognized that the Amazon rainforest was an entity subject of rights, essentially granting the rainforest the same legal rights as a human being. The court ordered the government to devise action plans to combat deforestation in the Amazon. However, the Colombian government has failed to address deforestation with little repercussions from the courts. In the Netherlands, the government has committed to reducing carbon emissions and is currently on the way to doing so, but is not on track to reduce them by 25% by the end of 2020. It remains to be seen how the courts will react to these missed targets with the limited enforcement mechanisms that they have. In addition, these decisions are often made against governments as a whole rather than the individual politicians, making it sometimes difficult to hold anyone directly responsible. However, enforcement challenges can in part be overcome by grassroots activist movements and nonprofit organizations who hold these entities responsible in the public sphere. We all have a role to play in holding our governments responsible. This leads me to the second venue in which we can address climate change as a human rights issue, which is in grassroots activism. Climate protests have become increasingly aware of the intersection of climate change, social justice, and human rights. Approaching climate change as a human rights issue has allowed for powerful coalition building and cooperation amongst activist groups across the globe. It also ensures that social justice and equality are at the forefront of the green revolution as we transition to a green economy and society. The intersection of these issues, an example being environmental racism, has elevated the level of urgency. In order to address climate change effectively, we will need a broad, diverse, and unified response. Human rights bring us closer to this unity. A robust and passionate climate movement with broad support may be the most effective mechanism for holding governments responsible in addressing climate change. I do appreciate your time, and before I go, I know that climate change is a daunting challenge that can be disheartening to many, but I just wanted to share that as I prepared this presentation, I spent over a week choosing from the many examples of progress that I've seen firsthand and that have given me hope. There's a lot to be hopeful about. We already have many of the solutions, and while we have a long road ahead of us, I hope that we all remain determined, confident, and optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Next, I would turn it to Carolyn Cromer for her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Kentucky, the United States. I want to apologize. My poster is pitiful, and I didn't really understand what I was to create, and so I apologize for that. But my name is Carolyn Cromer, and I am the Director of Ecological Sustainability for the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth. Their mother house is in Nazareth, Kentucky, in central Kentucky, and they have been on that property for about 200 years. Like many women religious communities in the United States, the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth are facing hard questions about declining numbers and questions of what will be the future of the buildings and the land that they own. Right now, the Sisters of Charity are in a period of discernment about what they're going to do with the land and buildings at Nazareth. We are at the stage in that discernment process where we are deciding, we're taking stock of what we have. So there was a lot of talk in this conversation about the buildings, hiring engineers to do analyses and looking to maintenance people to see what systems need to be replaced or are new. But we also thought, well, we need to do this with the land as well. And the sisters have as part of their mission to care for Earth. It is an integral part of who they are. Through the over 200 years of their existence, they have stated many, many times through value statements and goals that the Earth is important to them. Sustainability is important to them. So looking at the land and seeing what was there made sense. In addition, I learned that in 200 years, there had never been biological surveys, ever, of what was on the property. So 2020 has been the year of biological surveys. And I'm an ecologist, so it's been like Disneyland for me. It's been wonderful. We are surveying plants, birds, bats, fish, snails, small mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and some insects. What we're looking for are severalfold. One is to help us understand the quality of habitat that Nazareth has in order for the sisters to decide what the future of that land might be and what they should protect or what they could protect. They need to know what's there, what's the value now. And what we're finding is that Nazareth has a high quality of habitat. It's about 300 acres total, and about half of that is wooded. And these are woods that they had cattle run through them over the years, but they haven't had that in decades. And the woods have become quite good quality. We are finding some exciting species, such as orchids, which is an indication of a high quality habitat, spotted salamander, which is increasingly rare because it requires woodland ponds. So it needs upland habitat for its adults, but then it needs woodland ponds to reproduce. And an old farm pond that our archives told us was made in the 1940s for cattle has become part of the woods, and that's one of the woodland ponds that the spotted salamander is in. We are finding wetlands in the woods that we did not know about, as well as some glade species species that you would find on rocky soil. The exciting find is that we are habitat for the gray bat, and the gray bat is a federally threatened species. It makes its home in caves, but then has about a 30-mile range for eating and drinking. And Nazareth is part of that range. So we were thrilled to learn that. The hope in all of this, to me, is the change in perspective that I'm seeing in the sisters. When introduced to these species, they have learned that these are species that also have called Nazareth home for hundreds of years. And thinking about land, not just in terms of what's good for humans, what are natural resources for human use, but what is habitat for the thousands of species that don't typically have a voice when these decisions are made about, say, the future of land. So I gave a presentation to the whole congregation, and we talked about each of the habitats on campus, and the sisters were introduced to some of these species through photographs, and they started to get to know them, to feel a kinship with them, with these creatures who call their home as well. And the most impactful part of the presentation was I was using Google Maps, and I was on the aerial view, the satellite view, and I panned out to more of a landscape scale. And it showed that Nazareth is really becoming an island in a sea of agriculture and suburban development, making it all the more precious, sadly, but making it all the more precious as well. So it has made the sisters feel more of a desire to protect the habitat that they have, to restore habitat. They're in the process of restoring fields that have been in corn and soybeans for several decades and restoring them back to habitat. So the hope is that this kinship with other species that I think is so beautiful, and it does give me hope if we can get humans to stop just thinking that our species is the only one on the planet that has the right to use all that Earth offers. I think that's a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. We would now like to welcome anybody to take a 3-minute stand-up break. In the meantime, we invite you to ask any more questions you have in the chat.
So I'd be interested to go back to Carol D'Angelo's question. And I think this is open to everyone, Carol, if that's okay, everyone who's presented. For both or either group or any group if they wish, is there anything they want to share about how their experience had a Vincentian aspect to it, or how it stretched their understanding of the charism of charity? I think that would be a great question to address. So would anyone like to take that one up?
We're doing a 3-minute stand-up break.
I'd be happy to give it a shot. As I mentioned, the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth have, as part of their mission, to care for Earth. In addition, like Pope Francis has said, the sisters now consider the Earth one of the poor. I think is really profound. So when thinking about a Vincentian charism of caring for the poor, the Earth becomes part of that and requires our nurturement. Or nurturing. So anyway, that's something.
I would also add to that, we know that climate change is going to be affecting the poor, those who live in more difficult economic circumstances more and more. So you just look at something as simple as an urban heat island in our regular US cities. How is that going to impact people that are living in poverty? Well, there are more hot days. That means you need more cool air. That costs money. So I think even though it's one step to remove, sometimes that's why it's harder for us to think about caring for the environment is also caring for the people who live in the environment. I wish we could erase that connecting step that we as humans need. We need to see action, immediate result. But we're starting to see that now, and we're going to be seeing it more and more. Coastal cities deal with flood, we deal with rising temperatures and all the other things that climate change is going to be bringing. If we think that the people that live in poverty aren't going to be affected the most, then I think we're in for a big surprise. So I think we all should be getting ready for that. And anytime we embark on opportunities to serve communities, that we should be first looking at what are the most probable disasters and how do we start to prepare for them as servants, and how do we help the people that are living in that area also prepare for that reality.
That was a great response, Sharon. If you don't mind, I would like to add as well, just on top of it, that I think climate change not only will be affecting folks who we perceive or don't actually perceive in our day-to-day, but it will affect us as well. And I think that's what I would say, particularly Westerners and specifically Americans, just as the lens that I have, that we kind of forget or we feel insulated, and we're feeling those pressures now domestically due to increased flooding events and other issues that America faces specifically as well, like how insane our hurricane season already has been this year. And to me, in order to reverse a lot of this, I don't necessarily feel like it is going to necessarily come from government specifically. Policy may be a part of it, but it really also does have to do with community and community service. And I think that's where the Vincentian idea comes and intersects for me, is that folks, in order for things to change as well, like Jean gave a really great presentation on how policy can be changed, but I think the other component of it is communities coming together and providing service in order to reverse climate change. It really has to be a community, and I mean global community-wide effort.
Okay, I think we are ready to move on to our next presenter, which is Adriana Stanovici. If you are ready, go ahead and unmute yourself to begin.
Sure, thank you, and hello everybody. Thank you for all the stories you've shared so far. So my name is Adriana. I'm a graduate student at DePaul as well, and I also work at the YMCA at the national office in the US in the international department. So I work with many of our partner YMCAs in other countries. The Y has a presence in 120 countries. So one of the initiatives that I'm working on, which is very exciting, is called the Youth-Led Solutions Initiative. And the idea is that we would provide young people with an opportunity to take action on issues that they care about and that they're passionate about globally. The first one being climate action. So we're aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, and the first one that we're focusing on is Sustainable Development Goal number 13, climate action. So we are looking at, actually we're starting on Monday, which is really exciting. So you're catching me right in the middle of it. But we're looking at a 2-week event during which the first week is a regional preparation week where each of the geographic regions and continents are gathering the young people in their solution teams to discuss the context of climate and the environment in their region. So young people have signed up as solution teams to commit to a process to develop a proposal and a project that they want to do to address the climate crisis in their local communities. So we anticipated a group of about 300 young people or more. We're looking at 15 to 30-year-olds, so it's a relatively broad range. We've actually just closed registration, have over 600 young people signed up from 49 countries with almost 80 solution teams, which is pretty incredible, which I think also speaks to how much this topic and issue resonates with young people that are more in tune and are seeing the impact of the climate crisis much more directly. So next week is when they'll begin to connect on a regional level, discuss what's happening within their continent. So we're looking at North America with the US and Canada, Latin America and the Caribbean, Asia and Pacific Islands, Europe and Africa as well. And then the second week, they will have an opportunity to connect globally, and we're going virtual. This was initially supposed to be an in-person event in San Francisco, commemorating the signing of the UN Charter in June, apologies, obviously that didn't happen. So we're going virtual, which just means that we've also been able to reduce our carbon footprint with this event and to make it more accessible to a wider range of young people. So we're really excited about it. We have a number of partners as well, from the University of San Francisco, from academia to business with Salesforce and others to nonprofits, Sierra Club and World Wildlife Fund. So we have a broad coalition of supporters that are all working to support these young people. The idea is that the solution teams would participate, have meetings, begin to develop their proposals, then they're eligible to apply for seed funding. So they get financial support as well as mentorship and a leadership coach to help them with developing their own solution, and would then be able to go ahead and implement their solutions locally. So thank you for the opportunity to share. This is something new that we're doing. So we have a lot to learn from others and also from this inaugural event. And we're excited about the possibility of leveraging and adapting and continuing to evolve to be even more relevant and give young people a platform to lead and to take action on the issues that they really care about locally and also have global connectivity. So thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Adriana. I would now like to welcome Colleen McSwiggan to present.
Hi, everybody. I'm actually having some sound issues. I don't know. Can you guys hear me or not? Because I cannot hear anybody else.
We can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Yeah, it's a little rough, but we can definitely hear you. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm just gonna go. Cannot hear anybody else. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what I've done in my life as far as sustainability. Just want to give you some background. So my dad actually was a farmer in Iowa, grew up there in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and then came out to Cincinnati in the early 70s when he started working as a chemical engineer here at Procter & Gamble. But even though he left the farm sort of never left him. So he always had a garden growing up. He always had a compost heap in our backyard.
So a lot of sustainability was sort of built in for the way that we grew up. Some of my fondest memories are us in the basin in our laundry room when we'd be starting the plants. And then later we'd take them out and actually plant them in the garden. So again, a lot of that was sort of built in for us. So when I was old enough and got married and had our own kids, we wanted some of that to be part of our life now. So you can see the picture up on the upper left is my family. So that's my husband, Mike, and my son, Joe, on the left, and then my son, Jack, on the right. This was probably about 10 years ago because Jack is now taller than I am by quite a few inches, actually. And one of my sort of defining moments, I guess, in my life was actually kind of out of the blue. Jack had to fill out a biography project when he was in 1st or 2nd grade in one of the first days of school. And he had to fill out things like, you know, this is my name, I have a brother, he's older than me, you know, these are our pets, things like that. And one of the things he had to fill in was, the thing I am most afraid of is blank. And he's 7 or 8 years old, and he filled in climate change. And that was a big, okay, you were already worried about this, and you were only 7 or 8. And just knowing that he would inherit a world that was going to be probably not for the better, but for the worse compared to what I had growing up was a big sort of come to Jesus moment, so to speak. So I decided at that point I would do what I could to make it a better place for him and his brother when he grew up. So to that end, I actually work at Mount St. Joseph University here in Cincinnati. I'm the chemistry lab manager and the chemical hygiene officer, but then I'm also the sustainability committee chairperson. And in that role, we've done a host of things that I'll actually talk about more tomorrow in the talk that I'm talking with CJ Willie too. So I'll give you more about that tomorrow. But then sort of along the line, we've done electronics recycling days at Mount St. Joe, and that sort of morphed into the next thing that I'm going to be doing in my life. Hopefully still along with Mount St. Joe, and that is the Cincinnati Recycling and Reuse Hub. As far as we know, we will be one of only about 4 places in the United States that will sort of take everything that can be recycled or reused, but that can't go into the single stream recycling bins. Everything from, and a lot of it is reuse too, not necessarily recycling, but we have art supplies that can go to 2 different nonprofits here in Cincinnati. We have school supplies that can go to a nonprofit here in Cincinnati that gives school supplies to teachers when their students don't have enough of their own supplies. We can send denim for recycling to be turned into insulation. And the company that does that gives a part of the insulation that they create every year to Habitat for Humanity for insulation for their houses. We can collect crayons and turn them into new crayons that will be given to children's hospitals. So there are a whole range of things. And then one of the things we're most proud of, I'll talk again a little bit tomorrow about the relationship we have with Recycle Force, which does our electronics recycling days. But they also have a contract with a company called Brightmark that's in Indiana. And we will be able to collect on Recycle Force's behalf clean number 1 through 7 plastics, post-consumer, so not something, so anybody can basically drop things off. And we are, as far as we know, the only organization in the whole tri-state area here of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, that can take number 1 to 7 plastics. So we're really excited about that. As far as just other things we've tried to do sort of in our lives to make the world a little bit more sustainable, you can see the picture on top. That's actually from Google Earth. You can see sort of where our compost heap is in the back. We put solar panels on the roof of our house in 2016, and it's been one of the best decisions we've ever made. When we moved into this house, and it's about, I think it's 2,400 square feet. There were some days during the winters when we first moved in 2006 where we would be paying, some months I should say, we'd be paying $400 or more for heat through natural gas. And then $400 or more during the summer for all of our air conditioning needs. Since we've had the solar panels, I think the most we've ever paid in any month was $250, and that was because we had a series of about 10 days where it was under 0 degrees. So we really needed the heat that year. But other than that, it's been a great savings, and I always feel good. We can go outside and you can actually see our electric meter running backwards, which is kind of a really cool feeling. You can see we've got a pollinator garden there in the front. And I can't say that we've actually seen a lot of butterflies. We've seen some there, but then the birds also love them. We actually get a lot of goldfinches there, which is really nice. And then we do have milkweed on the other side, kind of a little island of milkweed. Again, I can't say that we've actually seen a lot of like monarch caterpillars, but there are other beetles and other kind of bugs that seem to love it there. And then we've also got our Prius too, which is really nice. Prior to that, I had a minivan, kind of, the typical mom soccer mom wagon, even though my kids never did soccer. We're marching band all the way. But it's really nice when I can fill up my tank maybe once every 2 weeks, whereas previously with a minivan, it would be about every 3 or 4 days. So I really feel like we've made a big difference for that. As far as other things, just sort of the way that we live our lives, we try to be as sustainable as possible. So, we don't get new cars every 2 years. We don't get new cell phones every 2 or 3 years. One of the things I'm actually most proud about for my son, Jack, the one who was worried about climate change, when he was in elementary school, the local zoo here, the Cincinnati Zoo, has a thing called the Go Bananas Challenge. And one of the metals that's actually in cell phones comes from an area where gorillas live in Africa. I guess it's mineral or metal, whichever it is. It's coltan is what it's called. And if you recycle cell phones, the more that you recycle cell phones, the less they have to actually dig in this area to get it out of the ground in Africa. And it's actually a conflict zone as well in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So sort of the less that can be disturbed there, we think the better. So while he was in elementary school, they had the Go Bananas Challenge, and each school or scout troop or organization that participated, you tried to raise the most points by getting the most cell phones. And over 3 years, he was able to collect over 5,000 cell phones, which is pretty impressive for a pretty determined little kid. I mean, he needed help, going to go pick them up because obviously he couldn't drive at that point, but he had a lot of drive and he made a lot of connections to get things. So I'm really proud of him for that. And then we just do some of the typical things too. So we use the reusable shopping bags. We've got recycling bins in the kitchen and actually some upstairs as well, so that we're not dragging stuff all over the house when something needs to be recycled. And just in general, we try to make as many positive changes as we can so that we can sort of fix this problem, because it's a big problem and not everybody has to do it perfectly, but if everybody does a little bit of something, then it will be better in general. And thanks for listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. I think we were all able to hear you. I would now like to invite Ramayana Ramoneth to present.
Hi. Can you hear me, everybody? Yeah, thanks, Olivia, and thanks, Colleen. More power to your family and you. So I speak this evening as member of the board of the American Friends of Water, WOTR, also called the AFOW. Now, our mission is to promote and fund the programs of the Watershed Organization Trust, which is based in Pune, a city in Western India. We seek to inform Americans about innovative development programs in water conservation and climate change adaptation in India that the Watershed Organization Trust, the NGO, undertakes. Now, to avoid confusion, I'm going to refer to WOTR, which goes as water, as the NGO henceforth. Now, I shall commence by sharing what is a watershed. Now, a watershed is an area of land comprising a common set of water bodies, such as streams, rivulets, which are very small streams, and overflowing ponds during rains that all drain into a single larger body of water, such as a large river, a lake, or an ocean. Now, watershed development refers to the conservation, regeneration, and the judicious use of all the natural resources, especially land, water, vegetation, and animals, along with sustainable human development within the watershed. Now, the story I share today is the story of Kintheda. Now, Kintheda is a small tribal hamlet, tribal being an indigenous community, hamlet in Odisha, which is a state in eastern India. So if you see the poster, you see that I have a truncated map of India with the state marked in red. So it's a state in the eastern part of India. The last 4 miles to reach the village, Kintera, is a narrow road along steep slopes that actually meanders to a hilltop which is inaccessible during the heavy rains, a period in South Asia called the monsoons. Now the village is at a height of 1,300 feet above sea level. There are 56 vulnerable tribal households that live here. The average agricultural land holding of each household is a meager 0.5 hectares, which, quick math, is about 0.98 acres. The main source of income is daily wage labor. This is labor that they get in any farm that they can work on in and around the village they live in. Due to COVID-19 lockdowns and social distancing norms, the villagers were deprived of work for almost 2 months. Even after easing of the lockdown, the villagers were unable to find employment. If at all they managed to find work, they were paid far too less than usual. Now, in these uncertain times, the NGO Water has been working to generate employment through Watershed Development. As the government gave the go-ahead for agricultural activities, the NGO initiated work on diversion-based irrigation. During excavation of the trench to lay the pipeline, there was a requirement of 60 laborers. With the help of villagers, the trench was completed within 5 days, which is remarkable. However, after completion of the trench, once again, the villagers were left with no work. Thereafter, a village development committee meeting, so this is a meeting of elected members of the village, was held along with a local government official of the village and staff of the NGO. Now, according to the villagers, since local buses and other modes of communication had come to a halt, they were unable to go beyond the village for labor. They inquired about labor opportunities and requested to be provided for jobs for sustenance. They also made an assurance that every member of each household will come to work and that the wages will be equally distributed among each household in the village. Now, following this meeting, the NGO, along with the Village Development Committee members, surveyed sites and drafted a plan for 2 patches of land where the surface runoff velocity was too high. A total of 9 continuous contour trenches were planned. I know this is a lot of civil engineering language, but during flash floods, the eroded soil from the hill gets deposited in the agricultural land downhill, resulting in massive losses of crop. The other patch was a slope, a terrace field where lentils was growing. Now, the bunds here were washed away during the last monsoon. Gullies, which are water-worn ravines, had formed due to high-velocity surface runoff. It was decided to construct stone bunds. These are literally stone dams, little sort of ways to prevent flow of water, and loose boulder structures, pictures of which you actually see sort of to the right of the list of pictures. The point I'm making is that it was decided to construct stone bunds and loose boulder structures in the gullies, which would act as outlets for the runoff to pass through without affecting the soil. This was a new experience for these villagers as they familiarized themselves with the process of demarcation of contours. So the work provided employment to 56 households of the remotely located village, and hence I use the bullet term of ethnic isolation. It will now help conserve about 47,498 cubic feet of runoff water from really going to waste. The water will be caught in these continuous contour trenches. The paddy field downstream will have sufficient water through percolation. This would be beneficial in the long run to this will actually be subject to the maintenance of these trenches by the villagers. Along the bunds, as I said, bunds are embankments or a causeway constructed from the earth removed from the trenches. About 78 lemon trees will be planted. As the trees will grow, they will hold the bunds together, eventually transforming the patch, which was earlier erosion prone, gradually transforming itself into a lemon orchard. Besides, contour line treatment will ensure that the harvested water in the treated area is at a uniform level, leading to even soil moisture across the village, across the area where this contour trenches have been built. It also helps in preservation of breakage and land leveling. So as the pandemic spreads further into India, the vulnerable communities such as these in Kitenda are trying to rebuild their lives and cope with the pandemic. So this is my somewhat long story of hope. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Ramoneth. Now to address more questions, I will pass it to Amanda.
Great. If we want to just put some questions in the chat, I welcome you to do that now, or invite you to do that now. Here's a question. Is the AFOW connected to DePaul? And if so, how?
Can I just do a video response to the question? Yes. So it's made up of the board of AFW, of which I'm a part, is made up of actually DePaul faculty. So we are present as well as former faculty who lead study abroad programs with students in the School of Public Service to these very villages. So the nature of the involvement is that we utilize students as a way to monitor and evaluate the preservation of these watersheds and all of the associated development that happens as part of water's work in India. But the parts of India that we take students to is western part, and the story I shared with you today was from the eastern coast of India. So the involvement is one of course, fundraising, but DePaul students are the ones that essentially inspired the creation of this organization. So they wanted to basically give back to water because of all the learning they had with their immersions in the villages. It's usually a week-long immersion in which they go with their research questions and collect data. So every time they go back, it's a new batch of students, they actually monitor and evaluate the preservation of all of the supposed outcomes of watershed development. So that's the connection. I hope I answered the question.
Beautiful, thank you.
The other question is, tribals receive the least attention in developmental initiatives in India. That's exactly right. And it's true of indigenous communities across the world. But certainly, I think what makes this particularly challenging is that this was a hamlet. It's not even a village, it's a hamlet, which is a tiny configuration of households in a remote area of the village in India. And these tribals, yes, because of their geographical location, received very little attention. And yes, even though constitutionally there is affirmative action in favor of the tribals, as you well know, it's the same challenges here in the United States. It's one thing to have constitutional affirmative action, and it's quite another thing to actually implement the promises made. So yes, good point. Thanks, Teresa.
We have another one from Sister Mary Jo, fabulous initiative in India, good example of systemic change for the villages. How are the salaries for the local people funded?
Now, this is a complicated question. So most of watershed development projects are funded by a German development funding agency that routes its funds through the government of India. So it's a combination of private and public funds that are then used to actually, so long story short, the decision in this particular project was to distribute wages equally across all households. That's the decision that the villagers themselves took in conversation with water, just so that there is no friction between households. You're talking about a tiny hamlet of 56 households. You don't want them fighting with one another about who got more money. So the salary is determined by a wage rate, a formula that Watershed Organization Trust has come up with. So they have to put in voluntary labor before they get their wages. So the rate is something that I'm happy to share with a little more research. I don't know what the rate for this particular project was, but it is above minimum wage of India, if that answers your questions. Is that Stein? Is that how I say the name?
Stein, yeah.
Stein, it's funded by private money as well as government money. But government plays a huge role in managing the disbursement of these funds. So it's the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development works with Watershed Organization Trust to essentially make sure that the money is equitably distributed in the many states in which water is the NGO works. So it's an interesting mix of public and private money.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is Pat again. I want to thank Olivia for doing such a great job of moderating our session. I also want to take a moment now. I'm going to share the screen where on Padlet.com where the stories are all posted. And I want to do that for two reasons. One, I want to show it to you because maybe you haven't visited it yet, and it's very exciting. But also because Brother Paul, who is in Namibia, we weren't sure he was going to be able to stay up late enough to be part of this session, but he seems to still be on. So Brother Paul, if you are with us, I'm going to show your poster, and then you can unmute yourself and say a little bit about it. We'd be happy to have you do that if that's possible. Okay, so I believe this is the correct poster, right, Brother Paul? And if you can unmute your mic and talk with us, that would be great.
Do you hear?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. So these are Catholic Youth Network for Environmental Sustainable in Africa. In short, we call it SENESA Namibia. This organization was established in January 2012 for the young people to representative from the university, chaplains, and the parishes from Kenya, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Zambia, Rwanda, and South Africa. So these are the representative members. And currently in Namibia, this one group comprised with the 15 members in our Archdiocese Windhoek. And in Namibia, we have 3 dioceses, and we're supported by the brother CMM. This organization is to create awareness in education for environment. The vision here is derived also from the Vision 2030 the involvement of the young people in the Namibia. In the education, it helped to utilize our natural resources on sustainable basic to benefit all the Namibians youth and help them to in this present future and the future for the protection of our environment. And this, the youth, the young people, has to play a role in advocacy so that they respect and help the promotion in expression on how the young people can be helped. This they do and involve themselves, and during the time when the government also support, because you know in this part of Namibia it is a dry, we have where we have the Namib, the oldest desert in the world. So helping environment with the planting trees is very essential. So in this part, during the World Environmental Day, people are mobilized to take something, and we make use of the planting trees for their beneficial. So the community members are encouraged to collect seeds, plant indigenous trees, fruits, trees for the seeds, for animal feed, and extra nutrition, and for the beauty and improving our environment. So this is the care. The young people are very happy currently. They are 15 and we would like them to mobilize, and they are happy to be involved. That's all I can say, summarizing that. Hello?
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Paul. We're so happy that you're still with us, and you could tell us a little bit more about your poster. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, Brother Paul, as yet. So in the meantime, I'm going to show people, this is the page, if you have not seen it yet, where all of the posters we've received are stored. And as you can see, some people have already started to add comments. There's a space at the bottom of each poster where you can add a comment. We have several here for that particular one, in response to Alex Kowalski. But all of the posters we've received so far are here, and the link should be live for you to either download a PDF of the poster. For example, Carolyn's, if we click on hers, you can read her entire presentation. She was the one who said from Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, she submitted a poster that didn't have too many pictures on it, but she also has narrative there. So that's all you have to do is click on it to be able to view hers. Others have links that will take you to the document on Google Drive or etc. So each poster is there. If you want to, again, add something, the first poster here has instructions for how to do that. It also has instructions for how to view the stories and to add your own story by going to this link at the in the lower right corner with the plus sign. You can add one.